here, and we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Oregon Fan Show, the place where we talk with Duck fans and college football experts about the things that make us want to shout. Our guest today is Randy from the HBTFdawgs podcast, a solo media operator on Patreon and YouTube, covering college football since 1998. He's a former alum at CNN and a member of the Football Writers Association. Have I described you accurately?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And now I'm working around on the Georgia beat directly here, working a little bit with UGAsports.com and some other entities. So trying to keep my feet right there in Athens, trying to stay on the beat.
It's important to bloom where you're planted.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm smart enough to talk with you after reading all that, but I'll do my best. I'm delighted that you came.
Hey, I appreciate the invitation. We were talking about this a moment ago. I'm just happy to be able to talk to the good folks out there on the West Coast. A little Big Ten crossover. I'm here for it.
Yeah, it's a natural conversation, Randy, because your coach and our coach used to work together. Dan Lanning helped the Dogs win a national title in 2021. So there's a big connection, and they even met once on the field, and your guys kicked our butts at 49-3.
Yeah, that 22 team was a bit of a monster. It wasn't quite what the 21 team was, but in the same way, it actually was a monster, but not in the same way that the 21 team was. That 21 defense will never be replicated. Everybody on that defense got drafted. And the 22 team was better, just in a different way. And that was quite the football team. So I wouldn't worry about how that thing shook out. That was a machine that year.
It really was. I mean, my goodness. Would they have 8 or 9 first-round NFL draft picks?
Yeah. And I believe the year before, it was 21 or 22. One of those years they had 15 overall, right? And they had, like you said, 7 or 8 in the first round. It was just insane.
Now, Coach Lanning deserves some of the credit for putting those guys together.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things about Dan when he was here in Athens was he was always one of those guys that was an eager character, right? He loved the game. He had the fire for it. He was a great recruiter. So absolutely, when he took over the reins as the defensive coordinator here in Athens, he went out and got his dudes, and they were part of that team. Absolutely. And we all knew, given the success that Georgia was having, that there was going to be some turnover, and that's what happens at top programs. And that's what happened with Dan. And frankly, from afar, it's interesting to watch him work, and I personally wish him nothing but the best. I mean, we were chatting just a moment ago. I think it'd be great if the Dogs and the Ducks could work it out somewhere in the future where they could have a home and home. But for now, we might just have to live in that college football playoff world, and maybe we'll cross paths there.
That's one of the things, Randy, about this college football playoff era. Everybody wants to schedule, all the ADs and coaches want to schedule so it looks like 10 wins on the calendar, and they make the college football playoff. They all want to keep their jobs, which is understandable, but it's college football fans that have to suffer through games against, nobody U and nobody State and nobody Tech. It's not the greatest of situations in the out-of-conference schedule.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. And here in the SEC, for years, we heard people talk about that late November game that always seemed to be a cupcake kind of schedule where you scheduled whoever was available that weekend, and other conferences would throw stones at that week. Meanwhile, inside the conference, we looked at it and thought, we need a break, because the grind that we're fighting through here in this conference in that era is just different. And, again, we touched on that pre-show. The thing about this current model that is interesting for me this year is obviously this is the SEC's first year moving to that 9-game conference schedule. So these numbers, you can go look them up. They're absolutely true. Every year, the SEC turns out the most NFL drafted players. They turn out, the highest rated recruits by, en masse come to the SEC, wherever they come from in the country. And the better players over the course of that 9-game schedule, it takes a toll on you when you play them. They may not be as deep as they once were, the teams, but the players and the level of physicality that this league requires, is a little bit different. So in this 9-game stretch, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens. And oh, by the way, Greg Sankey mandated that not only do we have the 9-game schedule, but we must schedule a Power 4 opponent out of conference. Now for Georgia, that's Georgia Tech. But in the years to come, Georgia's going to have the 9-game schedule, Georgia Tech, and oh, by the way, let's throw in Clemson. So now you've got, 11 games on your schedule that are against Power 4 opponents. So it's funny to me when I hear anybody outside the conference say Georgia doesn't play anybody. And I'm like, I think you're just being disingenuous and we can't have a real conversation because you're just not playing, marbles here. You're talking about something completely different. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be kind of scary, honestly, because I think Georgia's got a chance to compete deep into the year. Last year, when Georgia played Alabama in the SEC championship game, that was the 9th conference game. And both of those teams were just beat up to no end. And Georgia went out, manhandled Alabama. But then they had to try to lick their wounds and get ready to go play in the Sugar Bowl. This year, you've got those 9 games in the regular season, plus that other Power 4 game. So I have no idea how it's going to shake out. I'm just hoping that everybody stays healthy and we can have the best football possible.
I can agree with that. I mean, we all want to see good football. I kind of think it would help college football. And I've talked to a couple of other guys about this on the air. There's this dead spot in the sports calendar in August, those 2 or 3 weeks leading up to week 0. Nobody's really doing much. Baseball's in the dog days. The WNBA is arguing about politics. It would be a perfect time for college football to step in, play some games, build some of the excitement, and then they could schedule an extra bye during the week and still start the playoffs earlier. I just think that's a more workable model.
On its face, I don't disagree with you. But when I think about the way the schedule falls here for the way Georgia does it, every school has the opportunity over the course of those summer months to camp and bring players in. Georgia uses those camping weekends as recruiting weekends. So they get, guys on campus years ahead of time and they work them out and they start to get their boards put together. So I know that Kirby really values those weekends in June and early July. Then you have media days in the middle of July. Well, where we are now, where we have been the last few weeks, clearly they're in the middle of fall camp. So if you're going to play games in this 2 or 3 week window, that means you have to back camp up. And then you potentially start eating into those recruiting weekends. And you really do start to shift that schedule in a way that, given the parameters of what we're working in college football now, where people are committing earlier due to NIL and they just go ahead and sign the contracts and all those sorts of things, it really, on its face, it sounds good, but we might actually be making it more complicated if we did that. So I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just know that it would take a lot of work to make all that come together. And then there's the point that down here in Georgia, like if we're practicing full pads in fall camp and it's the middle of July, the first week of August, that is no small feat, inside facility or not. So you got to keep the player health in this conversation too. So I don't disagree, but I would have to just table that one and let's do some more research on it to see where we come down.
Fair enough. Beware of the law of unintended consequences because it always rears its ugly head.
Exactly.
One thing I will set in stone is college football can't be playing the national championship on January 25th. That's ridiculous.
I agree. I'm afraid we're going to end up in February, if I'm being honest with you, because they keep wanting to expand the playoff. I'm not someone who was for expansion in the first place. I stand by that. I just think that if we could do it at the old Division II level, if we can play it off and still be finished by Christmas or New Year's Day, there's no reason we can't do that at this level. The only reason that we don't do it is because of money and television and all the stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with the game. So if we're putting the game first and we're focused on what's best for the players and everybody involved, you can figure it out. But the motivation has to be there to do that. And the direction we're heading in doesn't look like that's going to be top of mind.
Well, it needs to be, because the national championship game should be played on January 1st, rotated between the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, maybe Mercedes-Benz Stadium, maybe the Orange Bowl, maybe the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. No more than that. Those are the 4, 5, 6 places where the national championship game should be played, and it should be on January 1st.
Look, I would sign that petition. I would absolutely get on board, because one of the things I remember from my youth, I'm a crisp 50 this year. So one of the things I remember from my youth was watching the Orange Bowl parade the night before the game, right? Yeah. My parents were out doing whatever they were doing on New Year's Eve. I was hanging out with the grandparents and we were watching the parade. And I just remember that like it was yesterday. And I looked forward to the Orange Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and all those things on New Year's Day. And there's a part of that nostalgia that I really cling to. I don't know that it's ever coming back, though.
That's a great memory. And that design was special. It meant a lot to young fans. It meant a lot to, just having continuity in the doggone game. I mean, now we've got the coaching carousel, classes, and the transfer portal, and the playoffs, and the NFL playoffs all running together. And it's absolute insanity.
Yes. And I lived that career for 25 years where these seasons start to overlap. And now we're talking about baseball and hockey and the NBA and college football and the NFL. And that's in October. I mean, you get down to December and it's a little bit different, but you still have that layering. It's a handful of stuff. There's plenty of content out there for fans who want to watch sports. There's no two ways about it, but I'm primarily a college football guy. So clearly my preferences are going to tilt toward the college game.
Me too. I just barely watch the NFL. I watch it to see how ex-Ducks are doing. To me, it's so homogenized and so parody driven that the teams are barely distinguishable. They're all running the same offense with different nomenclature. It just, to me, it's a little bit boring. I
miss the days of the monsters of the Midway, right?
Yeah.
I miss the days of those teams that had personalities. I'm a Raiders fan, believe it or not, have been since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. And I miss the days of the silver and black, and you knew their offense was different than everybody else's because of the philosophy they believed in. And they drafted for it, and they got they got free agents, to fit that scheme. And inevitably, that gave way to what the league has become today. But I absolutely agree with you that I just miss those things that I grew up with. Again, that nostalgia where I knew that the NFC Central or the NFC North back in the day, I knew what that league was, even though I was here in the Deep South, right? I knew that Green Bay and Chicago and Detroit and those teams, those were fun games to watch. And as a Raiders fan, I love the fact that I could legit have angst towards the team in Denver or the team in Kansas City, and I don't give the Chargers the time of day. So, that's just how that goes. And even now I understand those things still exist, but we just knew it a different way. It just felt more personal. And your word is perfect. The homogenized version of the NFL. I mean, you've seen the meme, I'm sure, where people talk about the European mind cannot comprehend college football. We see that in the South all the time. They can't comprehend the SEC, right? An SEC Saturday. That's how I feel about youngsters who are just learning the game today. They're growing up with today's football. I'm like, you will never comprehend the football that I grew up with. It's a completely different sport.
And we have to preserve and protect and defend as much of that football, the football that's full of history and nostalgia and joy and bands and tailgating and fans who dress up special for the game. We've got to save as much of that as we can.
Oh, I hear. I agree with you 100%. And that's a beautiful segue back into my team and back into my conference, because I was at school at the University of Georgia with Kirby Smart. Champ Bailey, Mike Bobo. We were all there at the same time. Coach Donovan was the head coach. I was riding the South Loop bus, and there's Bobo sitting, across the aisle from me. I mean, that's how tied in I am to this current regime in Athens. And one thing I know about Kirby is he is about that old style. You see it in the way Georgia plays. The bedrock philosophies of the program are built on those concepts. And again, tying it back to Lanning, I mean, he has brought a lot of that philosophy, not saying he got it solely from Kirby, but he has instilled a lot of that in the program that I see him building at Oregon. And, the pageantry of the South, I'm sure that the Big Ten has it in their games too. I'm not so sure it's as strong now as it used to be when the Pac-12 was a thing and you could have those really cool West Coast rivalries. I'm not sure how that translates in the Big Ten. Maybe you can inform me a little bit. But here in the South, it matters that we play Auburn, in the Deep South's oldest rivalry every year. It matters that I get to hate the Florida Gators in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party every year. And I look forward to it. I mean, that's what it is. It's a visceral feeling. And I'm starting to smell the grass. I'm starting to see the leaves turn and start to drop off the trees. And it's go time. It is go time, Dale. And I got to tell you, I don't know if you're feeling it in Oregon, but down here in the South, we are absolutely feeling it.
Oh, we're feeling it, especially now that the Ducks, when we played Georgia, and I'll say we because mine is the Oregon fan show. Mm-hmm. But when we played Georgia in 2022, mm-hmm. Kirby Smart licked us 49-3. And after we said, well, Dan doesn't have the players, and he knows that, he'll go out and get the players.
Yeah.
From your perspective, has Coach Lanning done enough to maybe close that gap between where Georgia was in 2022 and where Oregon is now?
Well, in this way, I really see a cool sort of thing developing here, because I would say that, and there's just one sort of blanket statement here, I would say given the style of football that Dan wants to play, I would have to agree that absolutely he has. And that brings us back to that old football we were talking about in some ways, because the basics of the game never change. And Dan took with him that you have to be able to play along the lines of scrimmage, especially the defensive line, if you're going to be a championship caliber team. So when I look at the Oregon Ducks, I'm like, okay, that's a team. They get it. You've got guys in the middle that can play the run. You've got guys that can come off the edge with a pass rush. You run the ball really, really well, even though you may not think of that first when you think of the Ducks. They run it when they want to. And the scheme around it is where, we have the ability to innovate and do things our own way. And I see that in Oregon. I know the trigger man has backed this year for the Ducks, so that's going to be good. I'm excited to see what they can do. Now, the second half of that is it good enough to win the Big Ten? Or is it good enough to go try to win the national title? And that's the beautiful part of this game that still remains, because at some point they may have to face Georgia, or they may have to face an Alabama, whoever it is. And you're going to have those contracting styles, right? They're going to conflict, and you're going to find out does good pitching always beat good hitting? Does defense always beat offense? Great defense beat great offense. How does it work? And we get those answers year over year normally. Occasionally you'll have that supernova that changes the board, but usually you're going to run into that somewhere along the way. And then you get into the micro niche of it all, right? How does this team match up with that team? Can the Ducks actually beat Ohio State or Indiana, or whatever the miniature matchups of it all? When you get down to
or Miami or Notre Dame,
you get down to that granular level. How do we match up? Because once you're talking about the Final Four, the Final 6, 8, all of those teams are great, which is why the whole thing around Georgia for the last couple of years, from everyone that's not a Georgia fan, where people say, well, why can't you win in the playoffs? Well, it's not like that's the first round game. Hand Georgia James Madison. Let's see how it goes. Do you think they're going to win? Exactly. So we're already in the second round here. You know what I mean? And at that point, All these teams are level. It comes down to matchups. And if we just look at, say, the Ole Miss Sugar Bowl from this past year, it took a supernova performance from a young man who earned his paycheck that night to cap off a brilliant season for Georgia to lose. That's not a game you should lose if you're Georgia. They converted a fake punt. They scored a defensive touchdown. They, had free runners on the blitz all night long. And time after time, that individual made enough plays to save his hide and did enough to win the game. So hats off to the young man. But I don't look at that as an indictment on Georgia. I just look at it as when you're playing at that level, that's what happens in the game of football.
A great player takes over the game. We're speaking about Trinidad Chambliss, who is back and absolutely is a great player. There's a handful of those guys every year that can lift the team to victory. Fernando Mendoza was one last year. Darian Menza looks like he may be one this year. CJ Carr, Chambliss. How about the Dogs? They're ranked number 3 in the AP poll. Josh Pate has number 8 Texas A&M winning the SEC. What do you say about that part of it?
Well, I'm going to say that this is going to sound too simple, but having watched Texas A&M forever, I like Mike Elko. I like their quarterback. I like what they have across the roster in terms of overall talent depth, speaking specifically about Texas A&M. But Texas A&M is going to have to show me that they can win when it really matters. They got to beat Texas. Show me you can do that. And then show me you can win a game at home in the playoffs, right? Like they should have rolled that season into that game against Miami and then handled their business. But their quarterback, had a bad day, turns the ball over. Miami was a great football team. You're going to lose when you do that. The entire year, I was like, yeah, I get A&M, but you got to prove it. And then when it came time to prove it, they couldn't. I still stand on that. I mean, I think A&M is going to be a good football team. We're going to learn some stuff in November that may make me change my mind about that. But until they go win the thing and prove it, I cannot put them in that top 2 or 3 teams in the conference. So maybe that's naivete on my part, but I just think that you're still going to have to play Texas and you're still going to have to play LSU and Alabama. You just got to prove to me that you can win it. And they'll have their opportunities. They'll earn it, and I'll give it to them if they do.
Well, Elko has definitely assembled a talented roster and spent some money on it. I don't think they have that incandescent kind of quarterback who can lift a team. I don't see that from them.
I would agree with that statement. That doesn't mean he's not a really good player. It just means that he's not that guy, right? For Georgia a couple of years ago, Stetson was the quarterback in those championship teams, but the guy that was transcendent was 19, right? That was Brock Bowers. That was a guy that nobody had an answer for ever, and that's the kind of guy we're talking about here. Or that absolute game wrecker on defense that, it's just unblockable. And I don't really see that for A&M. For the Dogs, I just realized they didn't actually address Georgia's chances. I think Georgia is about right. I would have put them at 3 as well heading into the year. There is a quiet confidence inside the building in Athens that they really like their team. Everybody knows what the questions are about Georgia heading into the year because they have to go prove it. And that is simply, you lost a lot at wide receiver, so who's going to be your playmaker? And they want to see whether or not Georgia has figured out how to rush the passer again. Those are the 2 big questions. And those are fair. I personally think Georgia's well positioned to answer both of those questions. And I think that inside the building, again, they are confident across the board with everything except maybe the backup quarterback position, because I was talking about it in spring. Coming into spring practice this year, everyone assumed that Ryan Puglisi was going to be the backup. And I kept saying, watch Ryan Montgomery. I think you're going to be surprised. Then spring happens. And on the other side of spring, Puglisi was still number 2, but he didn't play great in the spring game. And Montgomery played pretty well. Then everything goes radio silent for 3 or 4 months, as you know. They pop back up, and now we're hearing reports out of scrimmages and things. Puglisi's still not protecting the football maybe the way Kirby wants him to, and Ryan is producing on the field. So if they had to play today, I think Ryan is probably number two. Ryan Puglisi is probably still your number two, just because he's been in the program a year longer, so you would give him that natural advantage. But there is a real competition there at the number two quarterback spot. But everywhere else, even the parts that people outside of Athens have questions about, I think the team and Kirby are confident in what they have.
A quiet confidence is a really good place to be.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there are a couple of things. If we talk about the questions that everybody has about Georgia, about the wide receivers and about the pass rush, I will grant you those. That's fine. Fair. The things on the flip side of that coin, though, that you cannot talk about Georgia in this preseason run up to the season without mentioning are the linebacker group, that defense as a whole, spearheaded by that linebacker group, and the secondary is very close on their heels. That unit appears to be closer to 21-22 than we've been since. So that's very promising if you're a Georgia fan. And the other unit that you have to pay attention to is that tight end room, because it may not be the most sexy position to talk about, but there are absolute difference makers and mismatches that go 5-6 deep at the tight end position for Georgia, and they're all going to play, and they're all going to bring their own style of mismatch to the game. You could see Georgia run not only 12 personnel, 13 personnel, potentially 14 personnel, because these guys are such hybrid players that you can flex them. So now they're not in line. You put them in the slot. So you get those big bodies, and it's just a matchup nightmare for anybody. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch.
Tight ends like that can create such a security blanket for quarterback. You can make them look really good.
Absolutely. And the guys that they have, again, I talked earlier about being experienced and yet still young. That's the way this room is. They're led by Lawson Lucky, but then they have a bunch of sophomores, or true freshmen that are right there ready to play, because the old saying goes, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And Kirby absolutely subscribes to that idea. So you're talking about a kid named Caden Prothro, who set the state record here in Georgia for touchdown catches in high school, something like 67, a 4-time state champion.
And as a tight end,
67.
Yes. Smokes.
He's 6'7", about 240 pounds, running like a deer. And then there's the alien among the group, which is Elias Williams. He's 6'7", 250. Ethan Barbour, who started last year as a true freshman, got hurt in the first game, dislocated his ankle, fought his way back, and started in the Sugar Bowl. That young man is a talent that's waiting to break out. The name on everybody's lips this year is Jaden Riddell. He is a guy who's giving people like blurry images of Brock Bowers, and I'm not comparing him to Brock, but I'm saying he's that level of athlete and the way they may use him this year. And then you've got the old man in the room, and that's Lawson Lucky, and he is not anything to throw away. Lawson's going to be an NFL draft pick too. So that whole unit, and we didn't even talk about there's 2-3 other guys that we could mention. And the thing you have to watch when you watch Georgia, if they are not utilizing those weapons, then everybody should be upset, angry, and booing Mike Bobo. And I'm not attacking Bobo. I'm just saying, when you have a weapon like that, a room like that, you must use it. So when you watch Georgia play, pay attention to, even if they line up in the slot, who is a tight end and how many of them are on the field at the same time, because it's going to be fun to watch.
That's interesting, Randy, because we were talking earlier about a potential Oregon-Georgia matchup in the playoffs. And if the Ducks have a question, it's maybe at linebacker, where they sent Bright Betcher to the NFL, went in the 4th round of the Colts. He made 136 tackles last year. Well, they've got to replace all that production. And he was a mobile guy, a former safety who transformed his body into becoming a linebacker. Well, now he's gone. And they've got 2 guys who have talent, but maybe haven't put it together, not like that. And you take a Georgia team who can put 3 and 4 tight ends on the field. Well, that puts a lot of stress on that linebacker group.
Exactly. And you're hitting right at it, right? Are you going to ask a linebacker to cover one of those cats? Are you going to bring your safety down or your nickel guy? because they're going to be too big for your nickel. They're probably going to be too fast for your safety. And the linebacker is just like, good luck, friend. I don't know what to tell you. That's that unit again. They must be used. And here's the thing that's going to be a deep level, like a level deeper than your common average college football fan is going to notice. Even if they're on the field, even if the ball doesn't come to them, the way they're going to force the defenses to play them is going to change the approach week to week. So maybe it breaks out in the run game, or maybe it breaks out in the play action pass game to your wideouts, but you must account for those guys. And again, I say, if they're not scheming it up and using those guys, however it shows up, then they're not doing their jobs in Athens. I believe they will, but that's just something to watch. If you're watching Georgia play and you're not necessarily a Georgia fan.
Sure. Styles make fights, and
Yes.
Football is a game of matchups.
Yes.
Every time.
Absolutely. And you were talking about the linebacker a moment ago for Oregon. I know that Bear Alexander's out there in Oregon. I'm curious what that defensive line looks like, how he is going to be asked to step up this year, because I guess this is his final year now. Well, you never know in today's college football, but I think this is his final year. So, we've got a little bit of a tissue bond there with him as well. He spent a national championship season here in Athens. So, styles make fights. And I'm just curious, when I look across the Big Ten, I mean, everybody seems to say Ohio State, Oregon are right there hip to hip. And if you look in the SEC, people want to put Georgia and Texas hip to hip for the most part. So it's just going to be really interesting to see. You guys play Ohio State this year, right?
We play them on November 7th in the Horseshoe. And that has the potential to be when you all right? You need a break?
No, I'm fine. Did my mic not cut out? I'm sorry.
I always keep my big O cup handy just in case that happens. I won't say what's in it. That's a Oregon fan show secret.
I'm sorry about that. I tried to hit my cough button, and I guess it didn't work. So I'm bad.
No problem.
Something just got me right there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. You got the big G cup. I love it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I love it.
Okay.
Well, yeah, out here, that's the big matchup that everybody's pointing to. But if you point at it too hard, you forget about the 8 or 9 games before where you've got to execute and pay attention and be aware. Because even the bad teams in our respective conferences have a few players.
Oh, absolutely.
It's always possible to lose. That ball has pointy ends on it.
I try to tell people that all the time. It's shaped funny, so you never know quite where it's going to go. And that old saying, that's why we play the game. So you just don't know exactly what's going to happen. I don't act like I'm a Big Ten expert. I have purposefully made it my point, my goal, to focus on Georgia. I mean, I can talk about the SEC all day because there's crossover, right? I talk to other people who cover the team and other teams and things like that. But I don't proclaim to be, at least currently, an SEC expert. I don't proclaim to be a Big Ten expert, right? I can tell you about Georgia. But with that said, just looking from afar, I'm like, okay, it seems like if Oregon's going to get where they want to go, there's obvious roadblocks in the way at some point, because you're going to have to take out Ohio State or get by Ohio State. And then I'm going to give Indiana some credit here that I expect them, until we see otherwise, to be a competitive football team this year. So they're going to be right there in the mix, one would assume. I don't know what to make of Michigan, honestly. I like the head coach, but 20 years in, a change of scenery, is that going to be enough to reinvigorate that program, or is he just going to stabilize it? I'm not sure. I'm not even sure what the goal is right there. Maybe it's just stabilization. I don't know what I think about Penn State with their new head coach. I mean, I'm sure they have athletes. He's a good football coach. I'm sure they'll be competitive, but I would still put Oregon a notch above them, if they were squaring off. So that's just my, quick lay of the land there in the Big Ten. But you're right. At some point, We all have to head up against those matchups that are really challenging for us. We've been talking about the 22 team. I mean, just look, Georgia to win that national championship had to beat Ohio State here in Atlanta, right? And that was a very, very difficult matchup for Georgia, even as talented as they were, because of what Ohio State tried to do to them. So at some point you got to go prove that you're the best. And again, going back to where we kind of started this, I think Oregon has every opportunity to put themselves in that position.
It's a road for everyone. I mean, I'm looking at the Bulldog schedule, and first 3 games look eminently winnable. Then they have number 10 Oklahoma at home. They play Vanderbilt. Then they travel to Tuscaloosa, play number 13 Alabama on October 10th. Randy, what is the deal with Alabama? I look at that team, and it looks like they've kind of slipped a little. That the edge is maybe a little bit out of the program. It's tough to be the guy who follows the guy.
I 1000% agree with you. And this one is a little touchy for me because I have a lot of very in touch Alabama people in my circle. So I've got people who cover the team on the ground. I've got people who are on the periphery as fans who look at the team. And I like all of those guys. And I hear from the Alabama fan base that they internally are super confident, even with all of the turnover that they've had. They couldn't run the football last year, and they're like, how can it be worse than it was last year? That's the refrain I hear about the offensive line. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here going, okay, I still have real questions about what you can do this year on the offensive line. When you look at the wide receiver position, I look and say, well, RCW's out there, but everybody else, you're counting on a lot of production from a lot of young wide receivers. You have the same questions Georgia has as far as that's concerned. So I'm not jumping up and down screaming that Georgia's going to dominate at the wide receiver position. Yes, Alabama's talented. I mean, it's Alabama, but they still have to go play as young men, and we don't know how that's going to go. And they just named a brand new starting quarterback.
A guy with a lot of talent. A guy with forgive me, but he hadn't played a whole lot of football at the college level.
Exactly. And that means something in this conference. And I don't mean that as a slight to any other conference, but I promise you, it's different as a first-time starting quarterback on the road in the SEC. I promise. And so that's the offense. The defense, I think they are going to be pretty doggone good over there. That's quite possibly one of the best secondaries in the nation. I think they really feel good about their ability to get after the passer. They feel pretty good about their ability to stop the run, and they just really are confident. And I'm afraid that they are a little too far out over their skis. I see Alabama the way you see them, and it's not necessarily a structural thing, not necessarily from a program perspective, but talking to people who cover the team, they will readily admit to you that when you look at Alabama, no one fears the Alabama run game. They don't fear that offensive line. That was not true just 3 years ago, right? You still were like, we better buckle it on because this is Alabama. That's not how you view Alabama now. And I think people are having a bit of a hard time wrapping their head around that. Now, that doesn't mean that Kalen DeBoer can't be successful. But so far, even though they've advanced into the playoffs, won a playoff game, went to the second round, so on and so forth. I mean, if you look at the end of last year, Georgia manhandled Alabama in Atlanta. And then they go into the playoff game, they win, but then they get to that second round against Indiana and get boat raced. And it was because they weren't physical enough. And I think that's a hard pill for Alabama people to swallow, that someone's going to out physical them. And I'm afraid for them that could be a reckoning they have to face this fall. Again, they're uber talented. I'm with you. It doesn't feel the same. And unless they go out there and just show us otherwise, I think that's fair. So Alabama is still a powerhouse. They still recruit well. But to your point, as good as DeBoer might be, the fact that they won a playoff game still isn't good enough. I mean, half the Alabama fan base thinks they're going undefeated this year. The other half thinks that they're going to go deep into the playoffs this year and absolutely going to win the national championship next year. So that's just where they are. And, that is a hard, high bar to reach if you're Kalen DeBoer.
And Coach DeBoer is a good football coach. He beat the Ducks 3 times in a row when he was at Washington. But not every coach is a fit in every place. And I just really wonder if it's a cultural mismatch, Kalen DeBoer's style and his offense and his way of coaching and the Alabama tradition. I think he might have more success if he went back to Washington or took over, somewhere in the West or the Big Ten. Not to knock his coaching ability at all. It's just a matter of fit and culture and style and his way of playing football.
I have an anecdote to share about that. Okay. And I think on some level, as much as people might want to deny it, I think there's some of that's just baked in. Does that mean he can't win a national championship at Alabama? No, because you can recruit your way to a national title regardless of whether or not the fit's right. The thing though, is again, there's a philosophy that's just bred into the Alabama people. And it is, we are going to be physical. We're going to run the ball when we want to, and we're going to play crazy good defense. And that's just the standard. So anything that comes up short of that, obviously doesn't meet the standard. And I think right now, Kalen's kind of running on that idea that it's not his fault. What do I mean? I mean that Grubb is still his scapegoat right now among the Alabama fans. His offensive coordinator is who they want to pin it on, or the offensive line coach. And so they're giving Kalen the time because they're like, look at how he's recruiting. Let him build his team. This is what fans tell themselves, right? But at the end of the day, I think it might come back to what you said. Maybe as great as he is as a football coach, and he is a really good football coach, it just might not jive. The Jell-O may not come together ultimately. Doesn't mean he won't be successful and they won't win a lot of games, but they may not be what Alabama fans want them to be. And my anecdote was last year I was listening. They do coaches shows. I'm sure Dan does one. Maybe he does one where he goes out to a local restaurant or something for a remote taping or something. Kalen was doing one of those, and he was out at a restaurant, and the radio personality just asked him as they were looking out at people having dinner. He's like, man, we got some really good fried chicken here, man. Do you ever have fried chicken, Kalen? What do you think about that moving down here to the South? And Kalen's like, well, I don't think anybody should eat fried chicken, like ever, And I was like, oh, Kalen, man, I don't know who. Read the room, friend. Read the room. So
that was a Brian Kelly moment.
He's a healthy dude, and I get it, but I'm just saying, maybe just read the room, Kalen. So at the end of the day, maybe there is something to that he won't be able to outrun. Time will tell. Time will tell. And because now he's got his guy, that 5-star plus trigger man, right? He's got his offense with his guy, Grubb, that he brought back from the NFL from Washington, right? So it's time to fish or cut bait, essentially. If Ryan doesn't get it done this year, you're probably going to see some changes on that staff. Kalen's not going anywhere. He just signed that huge contract, and he's on the hook for it because it's guaranteed monies, big monies. So I don't see him going anywhere. The Alabama fans just might have to get used to some soggy Jell-O for the next few years based on their own standards.
Yeah, guys got to fit the program and the atmosphere and the history of it, or it's always a little clunky.
Yeah, I mean, again, can he win it? Yeah, he can. But to your point, is it just going to feel right? I don't know. Like, look who you're talking to. You're talking to a guy who's a Georgia Bulldog fan, and my head coach is a guy who played at the university, went to the university with me. Well, again, we were on, right there together. Like, he gets it. He's a Georgia dude. It's about Georgia, and everything's right. Yeah, we're going to run the football. Yeah, we're going to play defense. And yeah, we're going to have some attitude when we're in front of the media when it's appropriate. That's who he is, and it fits like hand in glove. And you're right. It matters when you get a combination like that. It truly does.
Well, I want to go back to something you said about you can recruit your way to a national championship. If Gene Chizik, Ed Orgeron, and Larry Coker can win a national championship, you can absolutely recruit your way to a national championship.
Oh, absolutely. That is absolutely the truth. And again, that's where it's different today, right? Because we're all still trying to figure out these rules and how it works. I mean, just look at the University of Texas this week. I don't know how much time you spend on the interwebs, but you didn't have to look hard to find that it seemed like there was some tumult down in Austin this week. You've got players' parents on the socials. You've got guys who are, being kicked off the team, reports of fights in the locker room, like there's all kinds of stuff happening down there. And Arch, by the way, your 4-year Golden Boy quarterback, Sark is stepping to the podium and saying, man, it was sloppy and we turned the football over 3 times. I get it's practice, but it wasn't a great week, if you're managing PR for the Texas program. And everybody is like, you look at what Sark's doing right now. They've invested so much in this team for him. He's been given everything he wants. At some point, you got to win. And he's got to beat Georgia, right? He's got to win the conference. He's got to make a national title game. How long do the Texas people hold their water? I don't know. When you hire, I say hire. Oh, that was like right out there, right? It just came out. You hire players. When you pay these recruits the way we're paying them today, you are not just a kid who's playing football for the University of Texas. You are someone who is expected to perform. And if these guys don't start cashing it in, at some point you have to ask that question. And we're just looking at Texas because they want everybody to look at them. Okay, well, then you recognize your warts and fix them, or they're going to make some other fixes, I would imagine, before too long.
When Sarkisian coached out here, we used to call him 7-win Stark. And now that he's at Texas, he's good old 9-win Sark. But at a place like Texas, 9 wins with all that money and the Lamborghinis in the players' parking lot, that ain't going to get it.
Yeah. And, talking about the NIL and the recruiting and all that, 2 years ago, I guess it was, Georgia was on the table for a top flight defensive line recruit. The young man wore a red and black suit to the commitment ceremony, and every arrow pointed that he was going to be a Bulldog. And then the day of the commitment ceremony, he signed with Texas. And he's at Texas. He's been fine at Texas. They hope this year is the year he becomes that difference maker guy. We will see. But you have players making choices about finances before necessarily their future in some instances. And I begrudge no one for doing that. I don't know your situation. And if that's what you need to do and you have the opportunity, do that. And that's why I try to tamper the people who are in my community when they talk about players and things. I'm like, it is what it is. You would make the same choice. This is the rules they're playing under. But the flip side of that, the ugly side of that, is that if that player is going to go to Texas instead of his home state school where he always wanted to play, and then it doesn't work out, then that's not really a great reflection on that A, decision, and B, the head coach who made it happen. You know what I mean? Like, you can see where I'm going here. And that's happened a couple of different times here in the state of Georgia where a top player went to Texas. So one of them, in fact, was all tied up in that business that we were talking about this week. So it's one of those situations where at some point the pressure, it bursts pipes. And I don't know what point that is for Texas, but they're playing the same game we're all playing. There are only 3-4 head coaches maybe in all of college football that really don't have anything to be concerned about. Mine's one of them. But beyond that, all of them are, as much as I hate to say it, they're just beholden to that bottom dollar and whether or not you're winning. And again, that eats at the root of what I know college football to be. Like, I kind of miss the days where you could go 8-3 and have a tremendous season. Like, your fan base could be proud. You could go play a great bowl game and you'd be like, heck yeah, man, go Lions or whatever. And really enjoy the season. And now people just get so blooming depressed like, oh, we lost in week 5. Well, there's the playoff. Oh, we lost the playoff game. So this whole season was a waste. Man, to me, college football is precious. The opportunity to show up and play 12 times a weekend and do the things that go around the game since we're not playing. Like, I get to spend that time with my daughters. I get to share that moment with my wife. I get to go make memories and have experiences and all these things. I value those things. So when I talk about the sport, I always try to remember that that is the center of it. And I'm going to make sure that as long as I'm having anything to do with it, we are going to observe those things. You're never going to find me screaming at the television or throwing a phone or whatever. You know, that's just not how I view it. And I just think that I'm going to take the little joys of the process, because only one team's going to win it all, you know, and hopefully it's my team. But if it's not, I'm going to have a great time on the journey.
And it is hard. It is harder than ever. It is impossibly hard to win a national title. You can do everything right the way Kirby Smart has in terms of building his program from the ground up and still not win a title.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Like we said, that ball is shaped funny and it takes weird bounces. So you show up, you take your swing, and hopefully it works out. The key is getting in the dance. And as long as you keep staying competitive, then I think that's all you can do.
Randy, I would be remiss and not a journalist, even though I'm not a journalist, if I didn't ask you about some of the off-field stuff, about all the speeding tickets and reckless driving and all that. Are you concerned about that and the image that creates?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm concerned about the perception of my university that I love so dearly. I'm concerned about the health and welfare of the young man and anybody else in the community that may or may not be affected by it. It's just one of those things that there's only so much that the coaches or anyone else can do. Ultimately, these young men have to make choices, and I just hope they make the right ones, because I know for a fact that they're being coached up on what to do. I know that they emphasize being safe and responsible with all those things. But I also know that at this point, because it's happened so many times, it is a hot button issue around this program. And there's no running away from that. Hopefully the day will come where I don't have to talk about it, but I don't like it. And again, I don't like the perception that it puts on the program. And I hope that we can get past it sooner rather than later. But these are the kind of things that happen across the country. And it just is that my school, because of the way things have happened, it draws a lot of attention, and rightly so. And it's not something I enjoy having to face up, but I'm not going to walk away from it either.
That was a fair and considered answer, and I thank you for it. And part of it too is systematic or systemic. You got a bunch of 19, 20-year-old kids, and you hand them $1 million or $2 million, and then you say, well, go ahead and go act responsibly. They buy a real nice car, and their prefrontal cortexes are not completely developed. They don't have a full understanding of judgment and consequences and how they might kill somebody, including themselves. So they make bad decisions, and it reflects on the community, the coach, and that stuff can happen anywhere. It's unfortunate over the last couple of years. It's happened a bit at your school, but we had a situation at our school where a player was going out to get some food and got into an altercation with a homeless man, killed him, and drove away. Now, the details of that story, are something for a court to decide about, and I don't know all the details. But the fact that something like that could happen, the lesson for me is all of these kids need guidance, they need support, they need a fan base that isn't jumping down their throat every time they drop a pass, and they need a coaching staff that's looking out for them and putting some guardrails in place so as little of that as can happen will happen.
And I'm fully aware that regardless of what I say, people are going to watch this video and say, whatever, he's a fan. None of that's true. I get that part. But I know from firsthand that, again, the staff in our situation is doing everything that they can do And the players will tell you that to a man when you ask them. They're like, I was told, I was shown, we did XXXXX to, drive this point home. And like you said, people are going to make mistakes. Hopefully that they don't end up causing the worst possible scenarios, right? Because goodness knows, this is that boring old saying, but if any of this stuff was the way it is today, if it was that way when I was in college, I don't have any idea how my life would have looked from the outside, and I would consider myself to have been fairly calm. But even with that, everything wasn't on a record. Everything wasn't on social. The pressure wasn't there. It's just all of those things. Again, they're being paid. I get that. But it doesn't mean that growing up and learning life's hard lessons gets any easier just because you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to eat tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like,
absolutely,
it's always hard. And so for me, in my space, I try to offer grace, not only to my team, but to other teams. And I try to apply the same rule. And going back to that idea that enjoy the season for what it is, only one team wins, and that entire idea, I talk about it a lot. Like, this is not a video game, right? These young men, these are real lives with real people. They make mistakes in the game, away from the game. It's not just playing on Xbox. And so often people in fan bases treat them as though they're avatars on a video game. And that's not fair. Yeah, it's just not fair. And so for anybody who makes a mistake, I try to remember that, I was young once too. And I try to allow a little grace. To your point, wrong is wrong. Dangerous is dangerous. And everyone has to be held responsible. But in the same breath, that's the other side of the coin for me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Coach Saban had his troubles when he was at Alabama, won a bunch of national championships, but he had some guys he had to make some hard decisions about, did they play or did they sit? And how long did they sit?
Oh, yeah. I'm old enough to remember those Nebraska teams, with Lawrence and just the decisions they had to make around those squads. It's just that way. I mean, heroes have feet of clay. Isn't that how the saying goes? Like, we're all human. Again, you just hope that the worst things don't happen and that people can actually learn as they grow, and it's not a pattern.
Ultimately, we all want them to grow to be the best versions of themselves, to use a phrase from Ted Lasso.
Yes. That's something I can get behind 100%.
Well, Randy, you have been the best guest possible, the best version of yourself. You've been candid and warm and interesting. I appreciate you for stopping by. I hope we can talk again.
Oh, man, this was fun. I'm looking forward to it. Before I jumped on, my wife, she's like, which show is this you're doing? I told her who it was. And she goes, oh, this is a fun one. Go have a good time. So that's how I rolled into it. So it was a good time. Again, I want to thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. And, who knows, as this thing winds down the road, I may have you come over and talk to my audience as well and give a little of that West Coast perspective.
I would be honored and delighted. I hope that happens. Have a great season. Enjoy college football with your family. And thanks again, Randy, for a fantastic hour.
Absolutely. Go Dogs.